What's your favorite romance novel? Not a reader? Oh well, what about your favorite rom-com? Or romantic period piece? Mine's Pride and Prejudice, book and movie, specifically 2005 version. Enjoying a love story from your favorite author or producer is relatively innocent. However, what if I told you that reading or movie watching could affect you more than you realize? Today, we will discuss how romantic media has projected impractical progressions of love and dynamics, created an uprising of dissatisfaction among consumers, and normalized toxic or fanciful behaviors over real functional practices. By the end of this speech, you will be able to answer the question, how has romantic literature and film created an epidemic of unrealistic expectations in love and relationships? So, let's begin. If you're anything like me, you've probably seen every Disney princess movie to exist, or at least a few. Though each movie is different, they all end the same. The princess lives happily ever after with her true love, which is usually a prince-like figure, or in Moana's case, her tribe in the ocean. It's a nice, satisfying way to end a love story for the viewers, but the concept of the perfect ending has many flaws that have had a negative impact on the way consumers view marriage, problem-solving, and their relationships in general. Let's look at Disney's classic Cinderella as an example. We see the magical resolutions of conflict through the fairy godmother and Cinderella's obstacles and outside factors disappearing when she marries Prince Charming. Obviously, we know that there are no mythical beings that will fix us with a bibbidi-bobbidi-boo. However, films like Cinderella push the idea that something beyond practical comprehension can occur and provide a solution to our problems. Cinderella and Prince Charming's relationship transcends societal expectation without repercussion. The narrative that couples who experience their happily ever after, in some form, are fulfilled and devoid of conflict translates to real-life relationships by putting pressure on perfection and instilling subconscious gaps in communication. Couples may find themselves thinking that normal positives and negatives are indicators of failure, hoping that rough patches will even out without manual work and effort to restore the connection. The happily ever after effect corresponds directly to impractical dynamics perpetuated in films and literature, such as soulmates and enemies to lovers. Firstly, the belief in the one, or the perfect match, can lead consumers to throw away healthy relationships in search of their idealized counterpart. Soulmate implies that love is a prophecy, therefore effortless, making people less inclined to build a connection that is not automatically present. David Scrum, an extensions family specialist at Utah State University, states that the concept of a soulmate, while romantic and appealing, can potentially be harmful in how it influences expectations and behaviors in relationships, and further emphasizes that building strong connections and ambition and understanding is a far better, more realistic approach to establishing a relationship, specifically marriage. Besides that, studies have found links between unrealistic dynamics and traditional roles or patriarchal ideas. The researchers and associates at the Departments of Behavioral Science and Social Works and Social Services at the University of Valencia draw attention to how gender socialization and established beliefs about love foster stereotypical gender schemes and values, which determine adolescents' experiences and interpretations of love and their first effective relationships. When the soulmate relationship appears in romantic literature or film, it's typically the women who are tasked with finding their other half, which are men in most cases. Boring, right? Anyway, on the opposite side of the spectrum is enemies to lovers. This trope often begins with a less than valid reason for the two to be enemies, like academic rivals or wealth disparities and other superficial problems. The writers then go on to glamorize hatred or condemnation, turning into passionate love without any in-between, like couples jumping into intimate gestures in the middle of arguments. In books like The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, conflict is often painted as the exciting stage before the climactic, intense romantic feelings, rather than a real, problem, right? This type of depiction desensitizes viewers to red flags and distorts consumer views on behaviors normally considered unhealthy. It can lead to potentially misguided fantasies and interpretations of disrespect or unromantic gestures as signs of love. Not only can consumers develop views of dynamics and love progression skewed, but they can also fall into a state of dissatisfaction in real-life situations. Consuming romantic media causes people to develop idealized views of what relationships should look like, leading to comparison and disappointment. The researchers and associates at the University of Valencia touch on this as well, citing a previous study in 2018 that showed adolescents who are exposed to media's non-realistic romantic representations tend to form distorted expectations about their relationships. These distorted expectations refer to the utter perfection, specifically in appearance and personality. Romantic films often cast conventionally attractive actors, which contributes to unrealistic beauty standards and a dissatisfaction among consumers when they're faced with, normal faces. Then we're met with the Prince Charming personality traits and male love interests, which affects consumers' standards in a way that can be unreasonable for real people. They're disappointed when their partners don't have epic or princely traits and exhibit normal faults. As stated by Irene Globin, a professor of communication at the Catholic University of Croatia, and Paula Stier, a member of the Croatian Catholic Network, these descriptions can influence young people who are still in the age of identity formation to interpret film images as cultural norms and stick to them as benchmarks in their own romantic expectations. When consumers find these expectations are constantly unmet, this could become a trigger for unhealthy coping mechanisms such as maladaptive daydreaming, which a publication by the National Institutes of Health deems as a time-consuming habit that results in serious dysfunction. As if that all wasn't enough, romantic media has normalized toxic or fanciful behaviors over real functional practices. Romantic literature or film portray controlling or possessive behaviors as indicators of deep affection, which really they're signs of an unhealthy relationship and mental instability. There's also the prevalence of cheating or partner hopping, which writers have somehow justified as a character's response to a conflict or a failing relationship. In addition to that, yes, there's more. Writers and producers take it a step further by evoking sympathy for the affair partner, or the other woman, while demonizing the actual wife or girlfriend. A prime example of this is Grey's Anatomy, where Derek Shepherd cheats on his wife, Addison Montgomery Shepherd, with Meredith Grey in response to her infidelity with Mark Sloan and his interest in Meredith. Sounds a little immature and toxic when you hear it out loud, right? Any narrative to create drama, I guess. It isn't just Grey's, though. Countless books, TV shows, movies, and even video games exhibit these, frankly, shameful actions, tying back to my point about desensitizing consumers to morally gray behaviors or flags in partners. Now, you may be thinking, well, what about the benefits? Romantic media isn't all bad. For one, it can inspire people to seek healthy relationships, help establish proper boundaries and foundations, and apply certain traits and behaviors found in wholesome stories. While this may be true, and I see how romantic media can be a positive influence on how couples act or function together, studies can indicate that romantic media consumption more often leads to negative outcomes where people look for the impracticalities of fiction in real life. The best explanation of this is the cultivation theory, which Lieutenant Antonia Theodora Maurice, a PhD candidate at Carroll 1 National Defense University, states changes the way an individual perceives and relates to social situations and can trigger a greater degree of acceptance of authority and can lead to stable attitudes, which tend to be repeated in social situations. Individuals shouldn't relate reality to fiction, right, as the problem begins if they do. Nevertheless, some may counter, romantic media isn't the sole explanation for unrealistic expectations. I mean, emotional immaturity, lack of experience, or other fundamental traits could arguably contribute more to a person's unrealistic expectations than their consumption of romantic media. And you may think that these factors potentially contribute to someone's expectations, and I understand why. They're part of our everyday life, while romantic media isn't, unless you're an avid reader or a movie addict. However, consuming romantic media that pushes fanatical myths, subtle or not, can intensify these issues and reinforce the already established faults in a person's standards or beliefs. A statistical analysis performed by the researchers and associates of the University of Valencia show that the relationships between romantic love myths and benevolent and hostile sexism was statistically significant and positive, where the R value was greater than P equals 0.001. While family members, communities, or other living conditions can be the sources of someone's sexism, many romantic myths solidify the mindset and predetermine what they may look for in a relationship. But what about this? Consumers are aware that romantic media isn't real. People are intelligent enough to recognize that romantic relationships in novels and movies are more than likely unachievable, right? Understand why you may think that, and yes, people are usually capable of determining what is fact and what is fiction. Despite this, studies show that the more romantic media someone consumes, the more that the line blurs without them even realizing it. According to Lieutenant Antonia Maurice, the individual may consider that the attitudes, behaviors, and situations presented in the media have corresponded in reality and change their perception according to these patterns. In some, these changes are small and seemingly insignificant, while others develop idealistic standards and impractical views on love. So, to sum things up, let's review what we talked about. In this speech, I expanded on 3 points: how romantic media has projected impractical progressions of love and dynamics, created an uprising of romantic dissatisfaction among consumers, and normalized toxic and fanciful behaviors over real, practical practices. If we've learned anything here, it's this: be careful not to consume too much romantic media, or you may find yourself becoming a hopeless romantic. Literally.